Car rental staff, what is your return vehicle horror story? Not a car rental staff, but hanging out with a friend who's about to leave on a long-as road trip. We hear some racket outside and there's some random chick going all public freak out on some dude car with a baseball bat. Busted off the mirrors, broke out all the windows, taillights and headlights, dents, the works. Fast forward about 3 hours and I'm driving my friend to the rental place so she can pick up a rental for her road trip, and guess which car is also in the lot? Turns out, the guy whose car got all ducked up had just rented it to break up with his girl because he knew it wasn't going to go well and didn't want her to duck up his car. He got all the insurance and she got a felony vandalism charge. Story 2. I worked at a rental agency shortly after college, and while this isn't gross asterisk, this particular story stuck to me. So, very occasionally people will rent cars and then just not give them back. You can call them over and over and leave messages. And you can try to hit their card on file as the costs mount. But as you can imagine, this type of person ends up having their card decline fairly quickly. Rental charges are mounting, and the person is Mia, so the main concern of the branch becomes getting the car back. So here's one of the more adventurous parts of the job. Eventually, you have to repo the car. One such time, we basically staked out this guy's house until he left with someone else, leaving the rental car in the driveway. The branch manager quickly jumped in the car and we drove back to the branch. Inside the car were dozens of boxes of designer sneakers, hundreds of bootleg DVDs, and dozens of fake designer purses. There were also substances in the car. We had to call the police to report all of the items in the car. Really, we called about the substances, but when the officer came, the manager showed them everything. Around a month later, the renter came to the branch to ask if we'd taken the car and if his personal items could be returned. The manager took him into the office, and nothing ended up happening. He just informed him they turned the items into the police because it was policy, not mentioning the substances or obviously stolen and counterfeited items. While it all turned out okay, the rest of us in the branch were crafting bricks when the manager took him in the office. The dude who had driven him to the branch was sitting in there with us, and we were all convinced we were about to get murdered. Commenter, not with rental cars, in my experience. Basically, we try to sneak the car out when the person isn't paying attention, since the rental agency has spare keys for the car. In my time working there, a little under 2 years, I never heard of someone being actually confronted. Plus, with a rental car, it's not like they can argue they should keep it. Story 3. I worked at a car dealer that uses the same guidelines as a dealers like CarMax. One-owner low-mileage cars from rental companies and off-lease cars. When cars used to come in for service, we would loan them a similar car to theirs off the lot and let them take it with a dealer tag until their vehicle was finished. We gave one lady a Jeep Grand Cherokee while her non-Grand Jeep Cherokee was in for service. This is a slightly bigger vehicle than she was used to driving. Now remember, these cars have to go back onto the lot once they're done being driven. So every customer was warned that every vehicle should be treated with care. This lady didn't get that memo. After a week of driving a free loaner, she returned the Jeep complaining of the gas mileage and that she had the hardest time parking it. We just took it as she really didn't like driving it. Boy, were we wrong. The whole passenger side had giant scratches going down the side. It looked like she had gone through the woods. Some of it was yellow, so it looked like she clipped one of those yellow pillars in parking lots. The interior was another horror story. The entire trunk area looked like a bed of a landscaper's truck. Dirt and mud everywhere. Detailing took days to clean it out. Best part? The leftover seafood containers left under the front seats. The car sat for a week after being returned BC of the exterior damage, giving time for the seafood to stew in the heat. If anyone doesn't know what cooked seafood starts to smell like unrefrigerated environments for a long period of time, it smells exactly what it is, a rotting carcass. The detailers weren't really able to get that smell out of it after the various amount of harsh chemicals. That Jeep ended up going to auction rather than back on the lot, rather than trying to fix and sell it for a profit. They stopped loaning out lot vehicles after that one. They flagged her for future service, and with the rental company, we then outsourced our loaner cars too. Story 4. Oh man, not a staff member, but this just happened to my wife and I. So we went to Hawaii for our 5th anniversary, never got to take a honeymoon, so this was kind of a bit of both. We reserved a standard economy car from Fox, never ever rent from Fox, and they said, "We upgraded you to this convertible." I asked them for the type of car I reserved, as the convertible had minimal luggage space. They kind of shrugged and went, "But it's an upgrade." My wife was giving me the just get the keys look, so I said great and signed for it. We drive around for a little bit and hit the beach and see some ants in the car. Figured maybe we picked up or parked on some ants. It's late, so we head back to the room and sleep off the 8 hours of travel and layover. The next morning, I see more ants. Then I turn on the air. Literally hundreds of ants come flooding out of the vents. There was a nest in the car. They lived there. I dropped my wife off at a coffee shop and returned the car immediately. They ended up giving me another convertible, which I didn't want. But when I told them about the colony, they said, yeah, that happens sometimes. Story 5. Old roommate worked for U-Haul in the late 90s. He had a few stories, but my favorite. Guy rented a 16 truck and went to business Costco. Apparently, Guy owned a restaurant or two and loaded up on 5-gallon buckets of soy sauce and 50-pound bags of rice. Well, he made it through the parking lot, but when he turned onto the street, his rear wheel went up on the sidewalk, and when it came down, the rear axle broke. He must have been going reasonably fast and forgot to secure any of his load. A lot of the buckets of soy sauce, which were stacked 4 tall, tipped over and flooded the back of the truck and street. The rice slowly expanded due to being covered in soy sauce, and the fire department had to cut the back door open as it was wedged shut. Story 6. I worked for Enterprise back in 08, 09 in Madison. We constantly had people wanting to rent Maduckin Chargers, which we referred to as MFCs, to take down to Chicago for the weekend. They would come back smoked out with ash all over everything, and McDonald's bags everywhere. Just a complete mess. We would rent cars with cash if we could get a $500 deposit on the vehicle, plus other documents showing they paid their bills and proof of residence. When people would return their car, we would give them a check for their deposit back because we didn't keep the cash in the office. One guy freaked out so hard because he wanted the cash right then and there. He was getting very aggressive and said he was going to go get his gun and shoot us all. We called the cops, and the guy never returned. Worked the airport location for a few months, and I had an absolute git of a branch manager. I would always have to work the night shift by myself, and we had to stay until the last flight came in, no matter when that was. So if it was delayed, we had to stick around. My manager would leave early all the time and never make sure I was set with cars for the night. Just hope that other cars would return and I'd be good. Constantly didn't have enough cars for people and would have to walk them over to Avis and hope they could rent them a car. Nightmare. This one is a horror story, but I used to rent cars to Craig Culver, the owner of Culver's, frequently when his car was being serviced. He always took the additional insurance, which was great for me. He got in an accident in one of our cars one time by backing into one of those yellow cement posts in a parking lot. He felt so terrible about it, but he was covered since had the extra insurance. Really nice guy. Story 7. I was an assistant manager at Enterprise, and I have plenty of disgusting vehicle stories, but my favorite story is a bit different. I got to work at 6:30 in the morning to start prepping overnight dropped cars. Pulled the first car around to the wash bay, and in the dead center was a steaming pile of human crap. After about 30 seconds of staring at it, a drunk and maybe homeless guy woke up in the bed of a Chevy Silverado, got out, and walked away, never to be seen again. Branch manager and I went through the tapes from the night before and saw him stumble into the bay, knock our vacuum over, take a dump in the middle, then climb into the Chevy to go to sleep. Story 8. I worked for a rental agency between 2010 and 2014. One time I had a tweaked out customer back his rental into the river. We had it towed out, and when it was being detailed, they found so much trash, including piles of empty bath salts packaging. Another customer had Parkinson's, and probably shouldn't have been driving to begin with. Within 10 seconds of pulling out of our lot, he caused a 3-car accident. Yes, he had the damage waiver, but he declined additional liability. Everyone was okay, but you could say they were shaken up. Last story for now. I had a guy return a car laughing because he hit a raccoon in his Yaris. He declined the damage waiver and had a $1,000 deductible. He proceeded to a public freakout when I insisted I collect his deductible right then, which he did pay. The car ended up being totaled. I have a lot more stories about rental cars involving drive-bys, substances, bank robberies, and even repossessing a rental car during a cookhouse bust. Story 9. Not staff, but renter. A few years ago, some friends of mine and I booked a few cabins in Costa Rican jungles of the OSA Peninsula, one of the last parts of the country that is still undeveloped. As aside from a few remote villages, most of the area is a national park nature preserve. We decided to rent a SUV in San Jose and drive it to and from the airport as a way to see some of the country. When I go to check out, they ask me if I want insurance on the car. Normally, I always decline, but I was thinking, since I'm staying in a part of this country that boasts no paved roads or electricity, maybe I should get the insurance just this once. I sign all the paperwork, get the keys, and the guy at the counter says, "So, where are you staying?" I said, "In a village called Cabo Matapalo in the OSA Peninsula." He said, "OSA? We normally don't rent to people who are going there." That night, as I was driving in, I understood why. After turning off the Pan American Highway, we ended up on the dirt road that would take us through the national park to the coast where the villages are at night. It was just after the rainy season, so there were a lot of big potholes, or whatever the washed out by rain equivalent is. We had to drive through 3 rivers, which were more shallow creeks this time of year, and at times had a hard time determining what was the road and what was just a hiking trail. They were all the road. I should also mention at this point that I tried relentlessly to get a Jeep Wrangler, as having that would have made this trip a blast. But apparently I was told that Toyota controlled all the rental agencies, so the best I could get was a RAV4. This car was a piece of crap. Halfway through the drive through the jungle trail out, suspension blew out. By the time we got to camp, our muffler was dragging. We rigged it with a coat hanger for the return drive. A few nicks and scratches from trees on the side of the road. We flat out beat the crap out of this car. The return drive was uneventful since it was daylight in the worst parts of the drive. But let me tell you, when I returned the car and they said, "Oh, you got insurance, you are all set," I ran out of there before they could change their mind. Story 10. The strangest incident was a gray SUV that was returned with several bullet holes on the driver's side fender and door. The vehicle was driven in a slightly bad part of New York City when the incident occurred. I don't know what happened to the driver, but we totaled the rental. I also came across a lot of weed, phones, sunglasses, and in one case, a Glock pistol. Story 11. On a 2-week work trip some years ago, my buddy and I are driving around Southern California on the weekend. As the sun starts to really bake into the car, we get this weird smell. At first, we each thought the other had bad beau, but pretty soon we've got the windows down even though it's 100 outside. I pull over and we search around. The car has rear seats that flip forward. Under one of them is this pile of vomit. It's not huge, so I think they had a kid in the car with one seat flipped forward, and the kid barfed to the side. We headed straight back to the airport with the windows wide open. The check-in area was deserted with only one guy working. We jump out. The smell. "You gotta give me a different car." Guy leans in and sniffs. "Yes, sir. Let's get you an upgrade." Left in a brand new, like 3 miles on it, Mustang convertible. Story 12. Oh, okay. So not a rental, but e-check. Buckle up, lads and gals. Let me introduce you to the bedbug apocalypse. Yes, bedbugs in a camper. So, setting the stage, summer 2014, New York. E-checks are done yearly, so you tend to recognize certain people after a few years. I'll refer to this family as the Smiths to save them from the embarrassment. Mr. Smith comes in with a Coachman cross country. It's a relatively high-end RV. Well, I'm assigned to take it to the heavy vehicle bay. Grab the keys, hop in, no big deal. It drives like a bus, so it takes a few minutes to maneuver the beast in. I got it in and onto the tach and start the wheel speed test, basically seeing if the speedometer matches what the road speed is. All good. Till I feel something crawling up my leg, I reach down, brush it, and when I bring my hand up, wait, blood, WTF? And I look down at the seat. I crap thee not, there were 100 bedbugs crawling up my legs. I pop the door, should have rolled the window, but panic, and ask for a containment bag, basically thick-ass plastic pants. And my coworker comes up, sees the amount of bugs on me and shrikes, then runs away. I slam my happy ass in the con bag and hightail it out of the vehicle, slam the door and motion to the other tech screaming, "Vehicle out now!" He runs, gets a tow truck, and as he's doing that, I run out the lot, strip down to small clothes and start hosing down, head to feet. I start having a full R-Public freakout and hose down for easily 10 minutes as my comrade tows the vehicle, still in gear, backwards out of the bay. Mr. Smith comes out, like I did something wrong, and starts yelling at me because he can hear the engine running on his camper as it's being towed well far away from the main building. I glare daggers and point at the bag, screaming, "Why didn't you tell us that your RV was infested?" He denies this, and he's in jeans and a long-sleeved shirt in summer in New York. My manager comes out, sees the con bag with my uniform in it, my boxers, and the RV not 100 feet away. She radios to the tow crew to confirm, and holy do they. Hundreds of the evil vampires are crawling all over the inside, easily visible the windows. She turns to Mr. Smith and says, "Sir, I suggest you leave now. Your vehicle isn't roadworthy while it's infested, and you should have kept it at home while you deal with the problem." Mr. S is pissed off, and after he got done swearing, to no avail to the manager says, "I can't very well drive without my license." My manager radios for someone to collect his belongings in a bag, and a minute later, someone brings him a garbage bag containing his wallet. I quit that job a week later because that noise, I don't need that plague. Story 13. 2012 Mazda 6 pulls in. The people get out and quickly go around the car inspecting it before heading towards the building. Eventually, I head out to the car for further evaluation. Nothing wrong on the exterior. Tires are inflated, all good. I open the door and sit in the driver's seat. I start to smell something, not strong yet, and look in the back to see if food was left. I get out, open the back passenger door, and see a plastic bag shoved underneath the driver's seat. 2 plastic bags wrapped around brown paper, all wrapped with box tape. I shove my head down there and retrieve it while holding my breath. Close the door, go towards the trunk, and place it on top. It's rectangle and about 12A height and 6.5 inches wide. I get my optional stainless hash 4 out and start cutting the tape. Big old gust of ass came out the bag. Finally, get far enough and, sure enough, it's a magazine, a Food Network magazine. Without gloves, I yank it out and something is odd. Pages weren't flapping in the wind. I immediately throw it and go inside to get some gloves and a trash bag. I get the magazine in the trash bag and head back. Someone decides to get curious and they take it out and start prying the pages open. Now the smell is everywhere. We look closer and it looks like horse jizz. Crusty and solidified, patters all over the place. Every pages that had the women you see on the cooking channel were cemented. Goodbye spring cookout recipes. A customer comes by and his senses must have been on overload. He's looking at it, we're looking at him, each other, and explains it's not horse jizz, but some crap you call AdBlue. It's fluid, newer VW TDI's vehicles used for emission purposes. The whole place got pranked. It went from what the hell to crap. We all learned something that day. Story 14. I work in car rental and I've got a host of stories. Vehicle was found the next morning after an escort beat her pimp and there was blood everywhere. Police were called and she was located, and fine. I've had all 4 wheels stolen off of multiple vehicles and a hatchback of a minivan stolen, all from the same location. They had a break-in also, and someone stole a car that was then parked in a service lot at a car dealership for probably 6 months before we finally found it. People have been killed in our cars that I've helped recover. I've seen cars impounded with police with gunshots and the car seats removed, substances, dozens of stories of customers refusing to return. I've had a car straight up stolen in front of an employee once and spent hours with police reporting then went to court 3 times for it. I've been in and out of court so often, I feel like I could be a public defender. I've had to go to trial over some of these cases and been called as a witness for testimony. Fun times. I've had people we've had to call the police on because they don't qualify to rent, and they don't want to leave until we give them a car, which we won't. I've recently had to argue with a woman who left a personal diary journal in our car that was, most likely, trashed upon returning the vehicle. I feel bad for her, as you can't replace those memories. But I also can't give her an answer as to where her journal is besides in a landfill. And she doesn't seem to understand people spend all day cleaning cars. Doesn't matter how fancy the cover looks. Someone probably thought it was a book, not a journal. I've had people leave entire suitcases filled with their belongings in a car. A suitcase has been sitting in one of my offices for over 6 months, and the customer still refuses to come pick it up. I've had people leave their forgotten iPads and other tablets in our possession for almost a year before finally coming to pick them up, and we don't even officially have a lost and found policy. We keep it to be nice, not because we have the space sometimes. One of my coworkers recovered tens of thousands of dollars in raw diamonds once. We found guns left behind, thousands of dollars in cash, substances, a baggie of WD we trash, anything else we call the police, as well as condoms and sex toys. I could go on and on. I love what I do, though. It's all just becomes normal after a while. And my stories are always good conversation starters. Story 15. Obligatory, not the rental staff, but a group of us were in Nevada testing anti-tank missiles. So we were driving our 80s rental cars off-road a lot, strictly verboten per the contract. And there was a cool, dry lake bed near the range, so of course it was our own racetrack. Woo! Until a thunderstorm the night before dropped a nice boulder off the cliff into the racetrack, and the dude driving didn't see it. 110 miles per hour right over the rock. Crunch, crunch, bam, and the car just gasped and quit, rolling to a stop. Radiator, big hole. Oil pan, ripped off. Transmission pan, torn open. Muffler torn off. Rear differential ripped open. Gas tank leaking, and every bit of life-giving fluid drained out. We got the range guys to tow it to the state road along with the rock. Put the rock on the shoulder, poured a trail of fluids from it to the car, and called the rental agency. They took the car, insurance covered it, but they were very suspicious. Story 16. I rent my own cars on Turo, think Airbnb for cars. One time someone brought the car back late by a few hours, which is a bit annoying, but oh well. Upon return, I noticed the front bumper was damaged, like they may have gone way too fast over a speed bump or something. Again, mistakes happen. There's a process for repairing stuff like that via insurance. It was just annoying that they pretended not to notice it was there at all. The car was brought back very late at night, so it was dark. Hard to inspect the interior, well without sunlight. When I opened the door, it smelled very strongly of WD. Like, damn. At the time, I thought it smelled like weed, but didn't have the confidence to say that for sure, because maybe it was just strong perfume or something. I don't smoke. They said they vacuumed the car before bringing it back, but it didn't look like it was particularly well vacuumed. Next day, I do a proper inspection and take pictures for insurance, etc. There were substances everywhere in the car. Yeah, they vacuumed it, but there were small pieces on the floors, under the carpets, in between seats, and actual big pieces in the center compartment. My only theory is that they rented the car for substances, transportation, or selling purposes. But even then, it looked like there was a big WD explosion inside the car, which doesn't make sense. Took 4 weeks to get the smell out, even after having the car detailed jobbed. And I had to leave windows open as much as possible, leave a bunch of drying sheets all over the car, etc. Oh, and that accident they had cost over $4,000 to repair. Story 17. Enterprise employee here. Have since graduated to their sales division, but I worked rental for a year. I have so many nasty vehicle and scary customer stories, but there's one that really sticks with me. I was working the return lane at an airport location. Basically, you stand there and check cars in, inspecting them for damages, getting receipts for customers, and sending the cars to get cleaned and ready to rent again. On a hot summer day, a guy pulls into the return lane in a Toyota sedan with a bunch of damage to the front driver's side of the hood headlight area. He gets out, hands me the keys, and tells me he is on a corporate rental and needs to exchange the vehicle so he can continue his travels. His company had booked the vehicle, purchased all coverages so they could not be held responsible for any damages, and we were obligated to swap out the car for him. I begin the procedure of documenting the damage and exchanging the vehicle for the customer. While I'm doing this, we start shooting the crap. I ask him if he's okay and what happened. He tells me that he was driving down the interstate the previous night and a man jumped from an overpass in front of him. The man was trying to dive by falling and being hit by a car. He struck the front of the vehicle and glanced off of it. The customer pulled over immediately and got out. The man who jumped was still alive, lying in the middle of the interstate and screaming for help. The customer ran to the man, and as he approached his broken body, another driver who wasn't paying attention ran over the man again in a large pickup truck. The man was killed, and our customer was splattered with all sorts of disgusting juice. It was then that I noticed the damaged areas of the car are specked with hair and bits. The customer seemed extremely disturbed, and the conversation pretty much died. Gave me a copy of the police report. I got him hooked up with some new wheels, and I never heard anything about it again. Story 18. I sell cars, so not quite the same, but we see our fair share of nightmare trade-ins and the occasional repossession. This one couple came in around November of last year, and were just some of the dirtiest people you had ever seen. I don't say this to be mean. They were truly nasty. You could smell them from the other side of the dealership, literal dirt caked to their clothes. What I'm driving at is that there is no way these people would be able to get financed on the vehicle they wanted. Well, a very stinky 4 hours in the dealership later, much to everyone's surprise, they were leaving in a fully loaded minivan. As it turns out, none of our suspicions about their ability to pay their bills were incorrect, and 3 weeks later the van had been repossessed. In 3 weeks, these lovely individuals had managed to make this vehicle unsellable. It was disgusting. Piss and crap on the walls, tobacco ground into the carpet, half of the dash melted. These people used power tools to remove the back seat from the van to sleep in it. The tech who took the repo had to wear a mask to drive it a block away into our overflow lot. Their deficiency balance, what is owed after the value of the vehicle versus the loan amount, was $16,000, which essentially means they caused around $10,000 worth of damage and devaluation after only 3 weeks. Don't do substances. And if you're going to do drugs, don't finance $40K vans while doing them. Story 19. I work for an airport. The worst thing was probably when our cleaning agents accidentally found top secret equipment some idiot left behind. He left like 75% of this crap inside the car along with a manual and the travel case. I don't have high enough clearance to even know what this thing is, but the guy who found it luckily did have just high enough clearance, as your military security clearance lasts up to 10 years even after leaving the service, to know that the dumb mother ducker was royally ducked when we contacted his chain of command. This soldier was so ducked that what they left behind would make them lose rank and pay as well as a crap ton of extra duty if they're lucky. Story 20. I was a customer, rented a beautiful car for a trip. It was covered in crumbs and the steering wheel felt greasy. I asked them to go back over it. I still found a 2-liter Coke bottle and crumbs in the seat, shifter, and that nutsack around the e-brake. Gross customer and lazy staff. Story 21. Customer story. Rented a convertible. Camaro, but doesn't matter for the story, out in Hawaii for a week. Wife and I were having a great time, and we're using the car extensively, see Oahu. End of day 2, we come out from dinner and she thought she saw something move on the seat. We take a look, but it's kind of dark and didn't see anything. Next morning, I pop the top and look around more, and it turns out that the car was infested with banana roaches. Freaked out and drove back to the airport and swapped the car out. It was pretty disgusting having had our bags and food in there. In hindsight, I could see that being a big problem in a climate like that, especially with customers dropping crumbs and stuff all the time. Story 22. Obligatory not staff warning. Van renter here. When I was 25, my friends and I rented a van to go to Bonnaroo. We drove it from Philadelphia. Good times. So anyhow, my drunk friends spent a good half hour jumping on the roof the first night of the festival. We were way too far gone to care about what may have happened to the van from multiple 200-pound men doing that. So fast forward 4 days, we're returning the van, and had completely forgotten about that, given that the van was full of mud and smelled like someone had died in it. After we return the van and the guy filing the return inspects it, he comes back in the waiting room of the rental office and asks, "Hey, can you come look at this for a minute?" So I go outside and he says, "Check out the roof. Did anything unusual happen while you had the van?" So I step up there and take a lot. The entire roof is caved in multiple places. Clear as day feet prints dipping 2. 3 into the roof all over. Van was likely totaled. I look at the guy and without missing a beat reply, nope, we had some rain. Was kind of heavy, I guess. No hail, though. He looked at me in complete disbelief, then quietly finished filing the return. A few days later, I get a call from the rental company asking, "Hey, is this Malin?" And they pronounced my name wrong. So I said, "Nope, sorry, wrong number," and hung up, dodging bullets like Neo. Story 23. Finally, something where I can contribute. It's only my 7th month in the job, but there was already some really amazing stuff that happened. There was once this time where we rented out a Mercedes-Benz V-Class to an older lady. She was a regular and would often take luxurious cars with her company concession, so there was nothing special about this rental. Well, then she didn't return the car, so we tried to contact her. Nothing. So my supervisor drove to her address to check if the car was there, and guess what? That old lady never lived there, and the company was closed 7 years ago. So our security department tried to turn off the car, but it didn't work, so they looked for it with the GPS. The last signal was in some small town in Poland. After we went to the police, we got the information that this old lady also booked cars with 4 other rental car companies and also stole all of their cars. The total cost of all cars was around 500,000 euros. There was also a small story of a car where someone puked, and the car smelled so bad that not one single driver was able to drive the car longer than 1 minute, so we had to get the car towed to a place who could remove the stench. And there was also this Asian dude who rented a car and did not want any insurance. So he got the car, came back after 2 hours, and just asked me if he could get the insurance now. Guess what? He drove the car into a lamppost and totaled it. In the end, he had to pay his excess gore the damage, so around 1150 euro, and got a new car with the full insurance. Story 24. A buddy of mine is a detailer that contracts with a rental place. He sent me a picture once asking what was in this trash bag he'd found in the trunk of a recently returned vehicle. It was a 39-gallon garbage bag full of empty single-dose Suboxone packets. Vehicle had also been smoked in, which he said is pretty much impossible even for detailers to completely remove without replacing all of the upholstery. Story 25. The worst I had wasn't that bad, but I finally found a thread about something I work in, so I'm going to share. I work at a small local rental company, mostly serves a specific community in the area and collision shops owned by people in the community. I've only been here for less than 1 year, and I've had so many people just not pay and/or not return for months. Some people bring back cars, especially minivans, dirtier than I could have made my car if I didn't clean it for 5 years. The most horrible thing I can remember now was the time I was doing the regular check, the exterior, for any damages. When I finish that, I get in the car to check where the miles and gas are up to and move it in. First thing I realize is that the car smells of actual crap. I get out of the car, finish up with the customer, charge the card, and he leaves. I go back to the car to move it into the lot. But as I'm getting in, I see actual crap on the carpet by the driver's seat. By the look and smell of it, it was probably human crap. The customers here definitely wouldn't own any pets. It was probably the first month of working here, and I really didn't know what to do. I just remember being so grossed out I got my coworker to help me. Story 26. Summer intern at Enterprise. An asshole customer makes my APM cry and she ended up quitting. Comes back to return the car a few days later. Ash everywhere. Car is super smoky. I come back and say the car smells like smoke, which means a $250 detail fee by the cust. He starts screaming and we go to check the car. Find a deodorizer bottle. He says we planted it there and that I need to work on my customer service skills because I'm not being respectful, literally doing my job, notifying him that the car smells like smoke. Called corporate, and he's banned from Enterprise. Story 27. Finally, I have relevance. I used to be the guy that inspected the car when it came back from rental before you hand the keys over. It was quite common for me to miss 1 or 2 if lots of cars came back at the same time. Once a guy got out of his car, our most expensive rental unit, and sprinted towards the airport. Although I didn't actually see him go in, I was left checking his car for damage. All seemed fine until I opened the glove box. Inside were 2 large pink dildos, some furry handcuffs, a BDSM magazine, and a baggie with white powder in. I thought it was prank until I realized there was nobody around to see it. I didn't get my usual report that the keys were handed back safely, but didn't think much of it. The next day, the cops had taken the car out back and were tearing it to pieces. Blocks and blocks of substances, I assume, stashed inside the driver and passenger door. Must have been hundreds of thousands of dollars. Got grilled by the cops about what happened and what I touched, etc. But my guess is that he was trying to smuggle and got cold feet, or something, and that he had a quite severe dom sub-fetish. Anyway, it was something different from the crushing monotony of that job. Story 28. My time to shine. Crap. Which one? The Toyota Corolla with several chocolate chip cookies mushed into the floor and left out on a 100-degree day? How about that other one, where I had to clean a minivan after Labor Day? Natty Light bottles everywhere. Cigarette ashes everywhere. Chips, chip bags, chip crumbs, everywhere. That one time one of our Range Rover Evokes came back and someone had been rolling and spilling cigarettes. Tobacco everywhere. If you rent an Expedition and treat it like a minivan, I hope you get hit by a bus. Or that one time I found a recently used condom in the back of a minivan. Or the hundreds of minivans I've cleaned where it looks like a child-induced tornado ran through the back. Why and how the hell did sand get on literally every surface of this Versa? Where did these people take a Nissan Versa? I don't like sand. It's coarse and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Damn sand. Or that QX60 someone took mudding last week. Who that takes a luxury SUV mudding in early March, and then those people who rent cars and smoke pot in them so much they come back smelling like probable cause. Story 29. I worked as a production manager for a car rental company in Florida back in the early 90s. One couple who had a baby with them on vacation ran a light and got T-boned pretty hard. The mother and father get sex heads together from the force of the impact and passed away. The baby in the back seat was fine. Eventually, the car was returned to us. I don't want to describe what it looked like inside. I was a young man back then, and I remember being devastated at the idea the child was orphaned and never knew his parents. Still gives me the chills to this day. Word I heard was the other driver only cared about when the insurance was going to pay to fix his car. I also remember another creepy story told to me by a manager who transferred from a location in New Jersey. Apparently, someone got murdered during the winter and their body was put into the trunk. When the car was returned and warmer weather hit, everything began melting and red liquid dripped out of the back. Secondhand story, so I don't know how true that one was, but who knew being in the rental car business could be so horrific? Story 30. Customer renting from Alamo in Vegas. Kia Optimus were the hot new car of the day. I remember almost taking the only one in the mid-size category. Got in the car to drive away and noticed the entire car smelled strongly of feet. Like, haven't changed your socks in 2 weeks feet. I really don't know how a car ends up smelling like that, but when we returned our Camry a week later, the fresh new dirty Seescourt Optima was still on the lot. Story 31. I worked for a company that was not Hertz for a short period of time. A lady came in and that she spilled her coffee and would be happy to clean it up if I gave her some cleaning stuff. We had a pretty strict policy of no customers in the shop, liability, so I said I could do it. The car sat with the windows down for a while outside in the summer heat, so it dried out. When I went to scrub it, the smell we reactivated, and it was most assuredly not coffee. It was some sort of pussy secretion, possibly mixed with pee. I was gagging with my eyes watering while trying to clean it. Not worth $12 per hour. Story 32. Another Hertz incident. Come in Monday morning to a new 1,400 kilometers Camry that won't start. Get one of the boys, bring it into workshop. Things looks absolutely brand new as it should, but once on the hoist, we find the sump stoved in with the oil pickup hanging out. Apart from that, and 3 holes underneath, 1 in exhaust, couple in the floor, everything is fine. No damage to bumpers or anything else that would suggest an impact. Engine is dead after running without oil, and renter is at fault and up for full insurance cost. About $1,200 compared to the $12,000 it was going to cost us. Later, we find out that they've contacted the renter, and story goes they were following an army truck on the freeway in high traffic. A box fell off said truck, and with nowhere to go, they ran over it. Renter was unable to pull over due to the traffic and continued driving until they could pull over safely, but by then, the damage was done. We contacted the Army and told them the story, time and place. Now, full credit to them because they went and checked and surely enough found out that this had all happened and took full responsibility. Story 33. I'm sorry to say that I probably created one of these stories. I rented a car to drive around Devon. I was nervous about driving on the left. I'm American, but was doing very well. Then I came around a tight bend on a back road and there was a big hunk of rock bang in the middle of the road. Emphasis on the very literal bang. It was the size of a tower PC and looked like it had tumbled down from the side of the road. I ran right into it and it jammed up under the front of the car. It slammed me to a halt, but I was able to pull off of it. I was amazed that the car still drove, but my relief was short-lived. The car squealed and pulled horribly to the right. I was on my way to the airport and had no real choice but to drive a slow and wobbly path back to the rental place. Imagine my walk of shame having to drop that thing on them like a hot brick and run for my plane, with only a pause to fill out drove directly into a rock on the accident form. Story 34. I used to work for Enterprise. We once found a car we had reported stolen because the renter had stopped paying their bill, returning our calls, and obviously wasn't returning the rental. The guy was an addict who has been living in the car for probably around a month. The trash was literally piled up so high in the back that you wouldn't have been able to put your feet below the seat. It was honestly really sad to clean out. There were a few NA flyers, but right next to it would be a thick rubber band to shoot up with. Guy was obviously struggling. It took us forever to get all of the trash out. We had to be super careful because we didn't know if there would be needles within it. We had to get it professionally detailed, and I think in the end they just ended up pulling the car from our fleet because it wasn't able to not be a disgusting car anymore. Also had a car stolen by the renter's escort. When we got it back, it was filled with empty beer bottles and used condoms. Story 35. I worked for one of the bigger companies in a large West Coast, USA city, in the reservations department. So I took inbound calls mostly, with the occasional pickup/drop-off if the front counter was short of bodies. A friend had worked for the same company a decade before I did, when it was a franchise location. They got bought out by corporate. and she said that the daughter of the franchise owner was constantly getting comped cars from daddy, and they were constantly getting returned covered in powdered substaces, WWD, ET. It was the 1980s and CK was popular, so lots of bloody noses from the little princess and her friends. The one that she had to tell me about was the return of a Lincoln Town car that had a trash bag full of pot and two *dead German Shepherd dogs in the trunk, which the lot guys discovered when they went to do the clean out and turn around. Little Princess got busted for mid-range trafficking on the local nightclub circuit and got banned from borrowing cars from daddy's work. Story 36. I usually do a couple trips through the year, and this one in particular, I had rented a car clearly, and several times stated was unlimited mileage. I was going from east to west coast and back. I called the rental place to see what kind of specific car I was given, and car had to be transported from another location, so he couldn't tell me exact info. The nearest place was half-hour away. I booked the car weeks in advance, just to show up the morning I planned to leave with the manager, not willing to give me the car that I had booked and paid for because it would put too much mileage on the vehicle. Told him to suck a banana and went to the place they had transported the car from and got them to transport the exact same car to the rental place I was at and went on my merry way. Story 37. I work at a Toyota dealership that rents cars for in-state use only, Arizona. Had dumb kid rent a new Tacoma, he took it to Coachella, had video of him and his dumb friends dancing on the roof and hood on his Facebook. Brought it back and we had the pleasure of informing him that the insurance is void as it happened in California, and also how insurance only covers accidents and not acts of stupidity. His poor father, that never taught him an ounce of responsibility, had to come down and cut a check for $7K. Was hilarious when he tried to argue the amount. Told him that if he doesn't want to pay now, we'll sue him for the damages plus court costs. Never seen someone in so much pain writing a check before. Story 38. Had a second job washing and delivering rentals. One day, I had to deal with a bunch of cars rented for a wedding. All the confetti, makeup, and spewed alcohol were kind of daily business until a used condom fell out of a McDonald's pie wrapper. Good thing I always wore gloves. Good times. The time I was genuinely horrified was when my boss there, a grumpy old lady nobody liked, fell down a flight of stairs in front of my eyes while pacing around talking on her phone. Nobody would have believed me. I wasn't the one who pushed her if she didn't remain conscious. Nobody would have believed the tripped on a stack of magazines left at the edge of the staircase. I was amazed at how pale my face was for the rest of the day. I'd probably be in jail now if she died that day. Found a used condom, and my boss almost died in front of me out of negligence towards her surroundings. Story 39. A friend of mine used to work for Six to rent a car at an airport. Apparently, after a 12-seater van was returned, the cleaning crew discovered a pile of crap in the seating row furthest back. They said it looked like an adult-sized amount of human fecal. The customers who had rented it were charged with the $200 cleaning fee. Story 40. Rented to somebody who should not have been approved for a rental, but it was being paid for by the insurance company and we wanted their business. A week or so into the rental cops call and say they found our car in a ditch trashed. Guy apparently sold the rental car for substances and the people who bought it crashed it. Also had the cops call once and said a guy with a violent felony warrant had our car as they were staking out the house and ran the plates. They wanted us to get him to return it so they could then arrest him. We called him, said the car needed a service, and we would switch out cars. He came in and ended up just wanting a ride home, so we load him and a few others into the big van and boom. 4 cop cars, a bunch of cops' guns drawn, descend on the van. Our van driver said it was the first time he had a gun drawn on him since Vietnam. Story 41. There was a regular customer who kept smoking in his rentals. It was an automatic $250 charge. Eventually, my manager refused to rent to him anymore. My manger tried for a company-wide DNR, do not rent, but never got the approval. Dude rents a truck from a branch 3 hours away. When his return date comes, he doesn't return the truck. The rental branch cannot contact him, and the truck goes missing for 3 weeks. Eventually, he drops the truck at our branch overnight. When we open the branch the next morning, we find the truck with a flat tire, side mirror hanging off, cracked windows, scratched paint, and the back seat covered in dog fur. My manager finally for the approval for his DNR. Story 42. Not really a horror story for me because I got used to it, but someone will probably enjoy it. I worked for Enterprise in a small Appalachian county that had a meth lab problem. As in 40 meth lab busts between January 1st and September 1st, 1 year kind of problem. In the wash bay, we had a poster up of how to identify a shake and bake, or one-pot meth lab, made from empty 2-liter bottles, and what to do if we encountered one because people who make meth rented our cars and left all their meth-making stuff in the trunk. Had to call the police a couple of times due to finding those or other stuff like handguns in cars. Story 43. Last week, my manager gave me keys to an SUV and asked me if I'm familiar with a particular part of town. Am I picking up a customer? No, you're getting that SUV. He points to the keys in my hands. Take Don with you. What is the address? I have no idea. In front of a medical clinic? It's a long story. I'm just glad to get out of the wash bay, so me and Don head to find the SUV. Disappointedly, I was too familiar with this part of town, and I literally found the SUV right way instead of taking hours driving around. When we took it back, I asked why we even had the keys. Turns out the lady returned the keys but refused to drive it back to the branch, claimed it was undrivable, said she hit something and damaged it beyond repair. There was nothing, maybe a scuff on the bumper. Story 44. 1. Picked one up at police impound, used in drive-by shooting 2. Stalked this house every day for 3 weeks looking for a car that was not returned, found out the renter just got out of jail for murder. Reported it stolen, he was arrested, met the guy, and he was super nice and apologized for all the trouble. 3. Girlfriend and troubled son of OC housewife, both addicted to meth. Police found him passed out high AF and arrested him in the car. He got out of jail 3 weeks later and killed a guy 3 blocks away. 4. Teen kid wanted to sue after repo because we removed the unopened box of condoms from our own vehicle. 5. Renter changed the license plates and gifted the car to a family member. Happy birthday. Go to jail. I'm sure I could think of some more. Story 45. Mine are mild by comparison, but here goes. I worked for a defunct insurance replacement rental company in the early 90s. We were the bottom feeders of the industry. Anyway, we would let people rent with a $250 cash deposit. Here are some of the cash rental highlights. Bullet holes in one poor 91 Dodge Shadow. Cars with laundry detergent all over the trunks. We suspected they were trying to hide the smell of substances. Poopy diapers shoved under the seat. A Corolla we had to repo with trash up to the windows. Other rentals were partially paid by insurance companies, and those entitled customers were the worst. They didn't want to pay a dime despite their insurance only authorizing $12 a day. Our cheapest car was $21 a day. It was a joy to constantly get yelled at by these people when, gasp, I asked for payment on their part of the rental. Story 46. 2 good ones for you first. Someone returned a car after months of having it cause of their vehicle being destroyed or something, and insurance was footing the bill for the Ford rental. It came back with a couple used diapers in the backseat cup holders and fast food wrappers lodged hard under the seats with a few butts and roaches in the floorboards. It took a solid week and a half to clean to be semi-decent after. It was never the same. Second, my supervisor got a call from someone. The company also detailed cars, so not necessarily a rental story, but the customer wanted us to clean up a SUV that someone had turned the gun on themselves in. He just hung up. Story 47. From the GF. Lady came in from another branch. All that branch had was a minivan and she didn't want it, so she came there. Her car was totaled in a wreck, so she needed something, but for some reason was really not wanting a van, so she got a Kia SUV. A few days go by and they reach out to see how's it going, etc. Lady doesn't understand why they're calling. Turns out she thought she was getting her new car from the rental agency. She'd already had the windows tinted and a sound system installed. Explains why she didn't want a van. Some people are really stupid. Customer thought she would get a replacement via insurance from the rental place. Put a sound system and tint in the car. Story 48. My band has to hire 8-seater vans to tour. For one of our tours, we had to hire a van on 2 consecutive weekends. The first time we took the van, we hit a kangaroo which damaged the whole front of the car bonnet. But we had paid the insurance cover, which meant we didn't have to repair the vehicle of any damage, which was about $2K, and we only hired the car for around $800. Next weekend, we get another van, hit another kangaroo. When we dropped to the car, we said, "Mate, I'm so sorry we've hit another kangaroo." He laughed and said, "Oh yeah, you got me," as if we were kidding. The look on his face when he realized it had happened again. We are now banned from hiring from that company. Story 49. Not me, but my dad. He owned a rental car company in California. He would bring us back the coolest stuff. Other times, though, because he also had to repo cars, we got a lot of stolen cameras and some strange stuff. One of the more fun ones, though, was he sold one of the cars, and the women didn't finish her payments. So he had to repo it. By some laws, I do not know, we got her stuff. She was studying to be a nurse, had some boyfriends, she left her diaries, left a good chunk of clothes, and was trying to get knocked up by one of the guys so he could take care of her. Story 50. Currently work for a rental company, and we had a lady who refused to return our car. After a few weeks, my manager realized we had the spare key because it needed its battery replaced. We normally keep both keys together. So we replaced the battery in another driver, and I went to her address and waited for her to get home. As soon as she got home and went into her house, I got out and ran to the car and took it back to the office. We all then proceeded to gather around the area manager's office to listen to the conversation with the lady, which he so graciously put on speakerphone. Was definitely one of the more interesting days at work. Story 51. A very good friend of mine is an auditor for ePrize, and I get a call one day. "Jay, can you dispose some bullets for me? I have a firearms company." "Sure. Where did you get bullets from?" "Well, we have acquired a bunch from rental returns, and nobody knows what to do with them." So I met up with her later that week and picked up a nice box of various bullets from people leaving them in their rentals. Most of the rounds have been disposed of properly at the gun range. Story 52. 5 years ago, I saw this kid bursting through the doors and trying to rent a car as fast as possible for a few hours. He was in such a hurry that he left a pair of drumming sticks on a chair. He came back in like 10 minutes to get his sticks and bolted out of the place. A day passes, and the car hasn't been returned. I call the kid, and he says that he got hit by a truck. The reason the accident happened is because he was late for his jazz performance, and he was calling one of the members to tell the band to wait for him to get back. Story 53. Okay, not a rental place, but I work for a luxury dealership. This one guy returned a loaner vehicle with bullet holes that went through the entirety of the vehicle, like entered from the rear and made it up through the center console and front seats, the interior covered in footprints and dirt. And it reeked of WD, though that alone is nothing super new. Found a couple shells on the floor. Cops had to be called. Guy was obviously like, I have no idea where those came from. Wasn't me. This isn't far from Baltimore City, so, draw your own conclusions. Story 54. One time on a company trip that was poorly planned by our corporate office, we were late driving from our Skate Music Festival location to the airport to fly to the next stop of the tour. The rental car return place was like 30 minutes out of our way round trip, so I had to call the rental place an hour and a half before they opened for the day and try to describe where their rental car would be parked in the airport parking garage so that someone could come pick it up. I never do crap like that, and every time I think about it, I feel bad for doing it. Story 55. I don't work in rental, but I do work in insurance. Had a claim reported today that one of our policyholders had rented a 2017 Bentley, then been held at gunpoint, and the vehicle was stolen. Policy was canceled also, so that was a fun call out to the rental agency. Not that we would have covered theft anyways. The only other claim on the policy that was only active for 2 months was also reported as the insured being held at gunpoint. All personal items and the key of the vehicle was stolen, not the vehicle itself, just the key. Story 56. I was returning a rental car with my 6-month-old son in the back seat. We were driving on windy Oregon mountain roads, and it was the last time I'd be driving that car, so I was having fun zooming around those corners. About halfway to my destination, I hear the distinct sound of vomiting, and when I look, my son has vomited all over himself, all over the seat and all over the floor. I had nothing with which to clean it up, nor any change of clothes for my son, and I'm sure that was a wonderful gift for the car rental guys. Story 57. Not a worker, but in 2003, I returned a rented Cadillac to JFK covered in blood. Covered. The entire front half of this white vehicle was deep maroon. Semi in front of me hit a few deer. I got rained on, but nothing big enough to damage the vehicle. Pulled into the rental return. Guy looks it over and says, "Is that blood? How the? I don't want to know." Then he gave us a no damage check-in and we were on our way. I think we broke his brain a little. Story 58. Work on the maintenance side. Had a flatbed roll onto my yard with a Camaro that was crushed to about half the size it was supposed to be. Truck driver said they had him retrieve it from the base of a hill road. Found out later the driver had died in the scene. Took a nosedive off the cliff of the hill trying to race back to not miss a flight. Passenger was his GF, survived in critical condition. That car sat on my lot for almost 2 months. Story 59. Customer, not staff. But one time I rented a car that still reeked of feud from the last customer. The rental agency should have done a better job of cleaning out the car before renting it out again. Story 60. A van was once returned with pine needles everywhere. Everywhere isn't an exaggeration either. Even the dash was covered in them. The people must have had multiple Christmas trees stacked to the roof in that thing. It took a couple of hours just to vacuum the van. The grossest one was when someone returned a car with chicken crap all over the seats. They used the car to transport chickens and didn't even bother putting a blanket down. Story 61. Had a college professor who worked for a national rental company who quit because of the following car. Someone rented a Cadillac SUV and failed to return it. Police impounded it 3 weeks later. Caught being used by a pimp, escorts. It smelled horrible of WD and sex. As you can imagine, the backseat area had been used countless times to preform sex acts. There were sued condoms and multiple stains. Clean out that car? Duck no. She quit on the spot. Story 62. Not really horrible for us, but for the customer. We had someone rent a BMW 530X, and we got a call that the vehicle had been flipped and totaled on the highway. The person driving fled the scene and was later apprehended by police and severely intoxicated. Unfortunately, it was the renter's boyfriend, and he was not an authorized driver, and due to intoxication, our coverage was voided along with the insurance coverage. The renter was responsible for a $50 000 plus bill. Story 63. My branch has a satellite location in a local Ford dealership service department. Customer pissed off with Ford's customer service comes up to the enterprise desk to get his car rental. Ducking Ford. I would be way more pissed if I wasn't so stoned right now. Story 64. A guy committed, died in a brown 2000 Dodge Intrepid C. He wrapped the end of a garden hose with duct tape and wedged it into the tailpipe. We had the car towed back to the branch. My assistant manager took the device and used it as a paperweight. The device is the duct tape adapter the guy used to create an airtight seal between the tailpipe and the hose. Story 65. I used to know someone who worked at a car rental place and was allowed to take a car's home at night. He would put his fingernail clippings in the visor to rain down on the next renter. Story 66. Film biz customer. We rented a car to match a picture car from another country, but the color did not match, so we painted it and then returned the rental. Almost got away with it, but the agent noticed we removed the windshield val tags, which we do not use in our country. Story 67. Not a renter clerk or any of that, but when I was an evidence tech, we had a few guns and luggage left behind in rental cars at the airport that I've tagged into our system. The owners would call in pissed that they have to talk to either the homicide division due to it being a weapon being abandoned, or burglary and theft division because of the luggage. Story 68. I worked with a guy that was a night shift supervisor, so he had the manager codes for computer access. He placed a car on turnback status, meaning it was flagged to go to auction. This caused it to be pulled from the fleet and prepped for auction. He then deleted the car from the inventory system. He stole a Mustang white-collar style. Story 69. Not a rental car agent, but former repo man for 2 years out of college. Almost every car I repossessed was trashed to some degree or other. My hypothesis was that people who don't bother to make their car payments also don't maintain their cars. Story 70. We had a brown Ford Tempo that was returned infested with roaches. We tried not to rent it out very often, but if a customer was mean to us, we always gave them the Roach Mobile. Story 71. Before I got hired, a coworker told me they found used needles in a car and the driver's seat full of piss. They called the police, but I have no idea what came of it. Story 72. My boyfriend used to manage a discount location. He told me about the incredibly hot hairdresser who wiped her boogers all over the steering wheel and driver's seat.